Before we jump in full force on color correction, let's take a look at the interface for Premiere Pro 2015. It's pretty much the same, but there's a couple of little changes that will actually make your life easier when it comes to color correction. You may be used to switching between your different workspace layouts by going to the window menu, going to workspaces, and selecting them, or using a keyboard shortcut. For instance, editing is Option-Shift-4 on a Mac and Alt-Shift-4 on a PC. And if you're used to jumping back into the color correction workspace, you'll notice the layout's different. But we're not going to use the drop-down menu. We're going to actually use a new bar across the top that allows you to easily jump between workspaces. So this is our traditional editing workspace, and I already have a clip in here. And I want to go over to the color workspace, and I'm going to click on that. As you can see, the layout of the color workspace is a lot different than previous versions of Premiere Pro. Let's take a look at the two areas that have really changed and are really going to help you. In the upper left-hand corner, the open tab is your Lumetri scopes, or the Lumetri scopes. It's potato, potato, tomato, tomato. Just make sure that you use one of the two or any way you want it, because it really doesn't matter what you call it as long as you know how to use it. So don't get lost in seeing the forest for the Lumetris. Now, let's take a look at the 4 scopes that are available. In the upper left-hand corner, I have a default setting of 4 scopes available. If you don't see the scopes this way, simply right-click on the panel, go down to Presets, and I want you to choose Speed Grade 4 Scope Luma RGB 601 Standard Def. Now don't worry that this says Standard Def, because we're going to make a couple of changes, but I want you to see the 4 scopes that we'll be using. In the upper left-hand corner is your vector scope, and that just allows you to look at the saturation and the hue of an image. Directly below that is the waveform monitor that lets you look at how bright an image is or how dark an image is and the contrast. In the upper right-hand corner is the RGB parade. It just breaks the luminance down into the basic red, green, and blue colors. And below that is the histogram, and that basically shows you the number of light and dark pixels inside your image. Now you can easily modify this by simply right-clicking and choose which scopes you want to look at. If a scope is visible, there'll be a check mark next to it. So for instance, if I'm not using my histogram, I can simply uncheck it, and now I have just the 3 scopes that I may want to work with. I'm going to right-click one more time, and I'm going to show you that under Presets, there's a lot of different ways you can quickly jump to the scope you want to work with. As soon as you modify it to a custom layout, such as I did with the histogram, you'll see that custom is selected. And Premiere will remember this every time you open up this specific project. So it remembers from project to project which set of scopes you're using on each project. The other thing you may notice that might be a little different than the way you're seeing your scopes is in your waveform. And if you notice, mine is black and white. Yours might have color in it. And you can control how you view your waveform, whether you see it as an RGB, in which case you're going to actually see the red, green, and blue elements that make up your luminance in your waveform. But I like to keep it basically black and white, easier for me to work with. So I'm going to go ahead, right-click on it again, change my waveform type to Luma. Now, the other part of the color interface is on the right side, and again, we go back to that Lumetri color. Now, when you switch to the color interface, you will always see this panel. And the design of this panel is to allow you to very easily and quickly color correct your image. It doesn't have every slider you might want. Those are still all available inside your Effects tab, but this is extremely powerful and lets you step through and quickly make an image exactly the way you want to see it. Now, it's broken down into multiple sections. The first section is called Basic Correction. Here you can deal with the color temperature of an image, and you can also work with the luminance, or how bright or how dark, and the nuances involved, and the saturation. Stepping down, By clicking on the next section, we can open that up, and you see this is called Creative, and this allows you to give a look to your image. Now we're going to go through in a lot of detail all of these sliders and how you can improve your images or give your images a look. For right now, I just want you to be comfortable with where things are and a little bit of what they do. As we step down to the next section, it's called Curves, and this is really awesome because one thing editors have been asking for years integrated into their nonlinear editing system is curves, and it really gives you some very unique and very precise control over your image. So this is where you're going to look at your RGB curves and a really new cool tool, the hue saturation curve. As you step down to the next section, this is your color wheels. And if you're used to using a traditional three-way color corrector, you can see that you have the 3 color wheels and sliders that can control brightness or luminance of the image in your shadows, midtones, and highlights. And your final section is called Vignette, and it allows you to focus the viewer's attention into the center of the image. One final note about the Lumetri color effect is it works in 32-bit float. And think of it this way. If you're working in an 8-bit color space, that's 256 shades of each color, which is nice, but not that detailed. It's 2 to the 8th. 32-bit float is 2 to the 32nd. Now, if you want to figure out what that number is, I'll let you go open the calculator on your computer, but realize this is millions of colors, and it really gives you a lot of control, and it's incredibly powerful as a color correction tool within a nonlinear editor. Now let's move on and start working with these tools.